Welcome, dear listener, to the abyss where shadows stir. Settle in. If you dare, dim the lights. Let dread seep in. Here, every whisper hides a scream. Every silence, a lurking step. Listen closely. The dark is listening too. Story 1. The soil of Blackmire Hollow never forgets. It remembers the iron tang of blood spilled in the old grove, the marrow snap of bones buried beneath standing stones, the whispered promises made to things that wore human skin like ill-fitting coats. The earth here swells with secrets, pushing them up through cracks in the pavement and between the warped floorboards of century-old farmhouses. You can taste it in the well-water rust and rot, and the faint sweetness of decayed offerings left at the edge of the Winthicket woods. Lena Crawford learned this when she returned home after 12 years away. The soles of her Doc Martens crushing Queen Anne S. lace that grew too perfectly straight along the roadside. The town looked smaller now. The white steeple of St. Bridget S. Church, tilting like a rotten tooth against the bruised Appalachian sky. She'd come to pack up Gran S. house. Nothing more. A week, she told herself. 7 days to sort through the mothball stink and faded quilts and whatever other ghosts the old woman had left behind. The first warning came at Harker S. General Store. Mrs. Harker didn't he look up from her crossword when the bell jingled. They re still in the ground, you know, she said, pencil tapping the newsprint. Lena froze, hand on the cooler door. Beg pardon. The bride gifts. The woman S. bifocals caught the fluorescent light as she finally lifted her gaze. Your grandmother, didn't he dig them up? You shouldn't he neither. Lena bought her bottled water and Pop-Tarts in silence. The cashier's fingers brushed hers during the exchange cold as creek stones in July. Gran S. farmhouse crouched at the end of Gristle Road, its sagging porch strangled by trumpet vines. Lena found the key under the same lichen-crusted rock, but the door swung open before she could use it. Wind, she told herself. Old houses settle, yet the air inside didn't he smell of dust and disuse, but of fresh-turned earth and the musky sweetness of rotting lilies. The grandfather clock in the hall ticked steadily, though Lena distinctly remembered Gran stopping its pendulum the day Grandad died. Upstairs, the real work began. Lena dragged boxes from the closet, coughing as she unearthed decades of National Geographics and mason jars filled with buttons. It was when she moved the rag rug that she found the loose floorboard, its edges worn smooth from frequent lifting. Beneath lay a biscuit tin, its floral pattern faded to gray ghosts. Inside, nestled in yellowed newspaper, were 9 iron nails coated in something dark and flaky. spool of black thread, a lock of hair the color of old blood, tied with twine, and a photograph of Gran as a young woman, standing barefoot in a cornfield, her arms raised towards something the camera hadn't he captured. The journal came later, hidden inside the icebox of a toy stove Lena had played with as a child. The entries started in 1953. Gran S. precise schoolteacher script detailing the summer those boys from the college came to study Blackmire S. folklore, how they laughed at the stories of the Hollow Bride, the faceless spirit said to claim a husband every 50 years, how they mocked the warnings about the standing stones, the cairns that children were whipped for disturbing. The writing grew jagged as the pages turned, ink blotted like tears. They took the bride gifts, an entry from October 31st read, dug up the iron and bone from the crossroads, called it archaeology. They don't understand what they unchained. Lena read by the failing light of a kerosene lamp. The house creaked around her, more alive now than it ever was in daylight. She told herself the footsteps upstairs were squirrels in the attic, the wet, clicking sounds from the root cellar, just the old pipes. But when she went to wash her face, the bathroom mirror showed a woman-esque silhouette standing behind her, tall and impossibly thin, with a veil that dripped black ichor onto the linoleum. The second day brought the crows. They lined the porch railing at dawn. 17 ink-eye sentinels with heads cocked at identical angles. Lena threw a coffee mug at them. It shattered against a post, but the birds didn't flinch. Their eyes followed her as she hauled trash bags to the rented dumpster, their silence more unnerving than any scream. At noon, Deputy Collins arrived, his cruiser kicking up gravel. Miss Crawford. He touched his hat brim, but didn't remove it. Heard you clearing out the place. Might want to leave certain things undisturbed. His Adam S. apple bobbed. Folks round here, we've got ways of let me guess. Lena wiped sweat from her forehead, leaving a smudge of dust. Ancient traditions, spooky rituals to keep the darkness at bay. His jaw tightened. Your grandmother was a lonely old woman who filled her head with superstitions. Lena hefted another box. I've got work to do, Deputy. The crows cackled as he drove away. That night, the dreams came. Lena stood in the wind thicket, moonlight bleeding through the canopy, to dapple a circle of standing stones. Each monolith bore carvings, coiling vines, that resolved into screaming faces, spirals that hurt to look at directly. In the center lay a depression in the earth, roughly person-shaped and filled with stagnant water. Something moved beneath the surface. Lena leaned closer. A pale hand shot up, gripping her wrist with fingers that smelled of grave soil and worm casings. She woke choking, her arm burning, where 4 bruises like rotted petals circled her wrist. The 3rd day, Lena went into town. She needed supplies, yes, but mostly she needed to prove she wasn't afraid of shadows. The stairs at the diner clung like cobwebs. Old man Ritter crossed himself when she passed his hardware store. At the library, the archivist hesitated before fetching the microfilm reels. Wouldn't he go digging? She murmured. Some roots best left tangled. Lena ignored her. The brittle newsprint revealed what Gran S. journal. Hadn't he the full story of those college boys in 53, how they vanished one by one that autumn, how search parties found their belongings arranged in strange tableaus. A shirt starched and buttoned around a pile of river stones. Trousers standing upright, though filled only with wind. A pocket watch ticking in an empty boot. The final boy was discovered in Gran S. cornfield. His face peeled off and nailed to a scarecrow post. The article ended with a single sentence. No suspects identified. Case closed due to lack of evidence. Dusk found Lena at the crossroads, shovel in hand. The map in Gran S. journal had marked this spot with a bleeding ink blot. 5 feet down, her blade struck iron. The bride gifts, 9 nails identical to those in the biscuit tin. Each driven through finger bones, gone black with age. Lena recoiled, but the wind rose suddenly, carrying a scent like opened graves and bridal bouquets left to rot. The bones began to hum. She ran. Behind her, the earth rippled as something uncoiled from its long sleep. The farmhouse offered no sanctuary. The crows were gone now, replaced by fat black flies that crawled over every surface. Lena bolted the doors, piled furniture against the windows. It wasn't enough. She heard it on the porch, just after midnight, the creak of floorboards, the wet rustle of a waterlogged wedding gown dragging across wood. The thing on the doorstep, didn't he knock? It scratched, long nails peeling, paint from the door in curled ribbons. I have your gifts. Lena screamed, clutching the biscuit tin. Take them back. Silence. Then laughter, like a death rattle bubbling through mud. When Lena peered through the keyhole, she saw only the veil, endless yards of filthy lace, squirming with things that glistened. She fled upstairs, the journal clutched to her chest. Gran S. final entry burned in her mind. It's my turn to be the anchor. The nails must hold, the thread must bind, the hair must tether. Forgive me, Lena. I tried to keep you away. In the attic, Lena found the truth. The ritual symbols, painted in Lamb S. blood on the walls. The photographs of every Crawford woman going back to 1703. Each standing in the same cornfield arms raised. And the shrine, O God, the shrine with its doll made of sticks, and Gran S' favorite shawl, the 9 iron nails driven through its chest, the lock of Lena S' own childhood hair tied around its neck. The floorboards groaned. Lena turned. The hollow bride filled the doorway, her veil parting to reveal not a face, but a swirling void where moths and memories went to die. The thing spoke in Gran S' voice, in Deputy Collins S'. In the sing-song tone Lena herself had used as a child skipping rope. You shouldn't he have dug, little anchor. Now we need a new knot to bind the fraying. When the deputy came investigating the abandoned rental car, he found the farmhouse empty, no signs of struggle, except 9 iron nails driven deep into the foundation stones. Out in the cornfield, scarecrow posts stood vigil over newly turned earth, and if the wind carried laughter sometimes female, young and trembling, with barely contained rage well, folks in Blackmire Hollow knew better than to listen. Deep in the Winthicket woods, the standing stones hum with fresh offerings. Some roots grow stronger when disturbed, and high above, the crows wheel in restless circles, waiting to see what new thing will push through the blood-warm soil when the veil thins again. Story 2. The stones knew her name before she arrived. Clara felt it in the ache of her bones as she navigated the rental car down the overgrown track. Brackens scraping the undercarriage like skeletal fingers. The moors stretched out in all directions. A sea of bruised heather and granite teeth gnawing at the horizon. She hadn't been back to Blackmore since her mother S' funeral 15 years ago, when the villagers had watched her from behind lace curtains, their eyes dark as crow feathers. They left Rosemary and Rowan twigs on her doorstep that night. A warning, not a blessing. The cottage crouched exactly as she remembered crooked chimney, sagging thatch, windows set too deep and narrow, like a face perpetually wincing. Her mother S' final letter crinkled in her jacket pocket, the spidery script repeating its plea. Burn the mirror, Clara, not the glass, the frame, the Blackthorn frame. Promise me. She found it in the upstairs bedroom, wreathed in dust cloths that billowed like funeral shrouds when touched. The mirror itself was unremarkable oval, tarnished silver, but its frame stopped her breath. Blackthorn branches twisted around each other, carved so realistically she expected thorns to prick her fingertips. Between the knots, tiny faces peered out, mouths stretched wide in silent screams, eyes hollowed to pits. Just an old folk art piece, she whispered, running a hand over the grotesque figures. The glass fogged suddenly, her reflection blurring as though seen through ice. A sourceless chill crept up her spine. That night, the wind brought voices. Clara woke to the sound of children chanting beyond her window, their words blurred by the constant moorland gale. Hollow face takes what S owed, flesh for flesh, and road for road. When she pressed her face to the cold glass, the moonlit yard stood empty save for the standing stone at the property S edge. A jagged finger of granite, etched with symbols that made her temples throb to look upon. Her mother had called it the old guide. Never touch it after sundown, she'd say. It S, not for the living to meddle with. The next morning, Mrs. Peatley from the village arrived with a basket of scones, and terror barely contained beneath her floral perfume. "You'll be wanting this," she said, thrusting a bolt of black velvet at Clara. Her knuckles were blue, with faded tattooed spirals, the mark of the old families. Cover that mirror before nightfall. Every night. It's just a family heirloom. That mirror no more your family than the rot is part of the tooth. The old woman's voice cracked like a whip. Your grandmother stole it from the barrow, mound up. A dead woman's cross. Thought it made her clever, peeking through the veil. But doors swing both ways, girl. Clara laughed, the sound too loud in the peat-scented gloom. Superstitions. My mother believed in all that too, toward the end. Mrs. Peatley's eyes drifted to the standing stone. They bound it here, long ago. The hollow one fed it scraps of memory, bad dreams. The odd wanderer when the harvest failed. The mirror its window. The frame its cage. She grasped Clara's wrist, her grip startlingly strong. Your blood the lock. Break the frame, and you'll see what happens when a hunger that starved for centuries finally gets a taste. Clara waited until the old woman's footsteps faded down the lane before tossing the velvet cloth over a chair. The mirror gleamed smugly in the afternoon light. She dreamed of roots that night, thick, pulsing tendrils burrowing up through the cottage floorboards. They coiled around her ankles as she tried to run, thorns breaking skin. The mirror's surface rippled like water, and something pressed against it from behind long fingers with too many joints. A face that shifted between a dozen screaming mouths. Mirror's a door, not a looking glass. Her mother's voice whispered from the walls. Should we burned it? Should we burned it with me inside? Clara woke screaming, her sheets soaked with sweat. The mirror stood uncovered across the room. She could be sworn she'd drawn the curtains before bed, but moonlight pooled on its surface like liquid mercury. Her reflection stared back, except the eyes were black pits, and the mouth stretched sideways, tearing at the corners, teeth glistening sharp as shards of glass. she ran, bare feet pounding down the stairs, out into the mist-choked yard. The standing stone loomed ahead, its carvings glowing faintly blue. Clara pressed her palms against its icy surface, and the world twisted. Suddenly, she was seeing double the cottage before her, but overlaid with another structure. Low stone walls open to the sky, altar stones crusted dark, shadows moving in ways shadows shouldn't he. A circle of figures chanted, their faces hidden behind oak masks, carved with spiral eyes. Before them, bound to the stone, a woman screamed as smoke poured from her mouth, and no smoke that coalesced into something lean and many-limbed. Its face, a shifting void. Hollow face, the villagers intoned. We give this thief who stole your prison. Take her breath, her bones, her beating heart. Leave our children safe. Leave our memories whole. The vision shattered. Clara stumbled back, vomiting bile onto the heather. When she looked up, the standing stone wept dark fluid from its carvings. Mrs. Peatley S. cottage stood empty when Clara pounded on the door at dawn. Cold ashes in the hearth, a half-knitted scarf abandoned on the rocking chair. On the kitchen table, a photo album lay open to a 1923 newspaper clipping. Local woman disappears. 5th this month. Authorities baffled by remains found in peat bog skeletons, perfectly preserved save for missing faces. The next page showed Clara S. grandmother smiling beside the newly installed mirror, its frame still gleaming raw and unweathered. The caption read, "Archaeologist returns triumphant from Barrow Mound excavation." By nightfall, the whispering began in earnest. It started as static in her peripheral vision shapes, flitting past windows. Then came the fingerprints, black smudges around the mirror S edges, spreading like mold across the walls. The cottage S smell changed wet earth and rotting meat, the stench of something unearthed. Clara tried to burn the frame. She dragged the mirror out to the yard, doused the blackthorn in lamp oil, and threw a match. Flames roared up, but instead of crackling wood, she heard laughter, high and hollow, like wind through dead trees. The fire died instantly. The frame remained unscathed, but the ground around it, grass, withered in a perfect circle. Insects fell from the air, desiccated husks, and in the center, a single footprint, long toes, claws caked with black mud. The village came for her at dusk, on Midsummer S. Eve. Clara watched from the attic window as torchlight snaked up the moor, a dozen figures in rough-spun cloaks, faces hidden. They carried something heavy between them, wrapped in burial shrouds. When they reached the standing stone, their chanting began the same guttural syllables from her vision. She almost didn't hear the creak on the stairs. You should have covered the mirror. Mrs. Peatley stood in the doorway, but not the Mrs. Peatley who D. brought scones. This woman S. eyes were milk-white, her skin translucent as parchment, bloodless lips peeled back from iron-capped teeth. It has been so long since a proper feeding. We used to give it criminals, then strangers, then our own, when the hunger grew too sharp. Clara backed toward the uncovered mirror. Her reflection did the same but slower, head tilting at an impossible angle. Your grandmother thought she could control it. The thing wearing Mrs. Peatley S. skin advanced, stole the prison, bound it to her bloodline. Clever, but flesh decays, girl. Blood thins, and you it inhaled deeply. You stink of fear. The mirror fogged. Clara S. hand passed through the glass like water. From the depths, cold fingers interlaced with hers. Outside, the villagers chanting hit a fever pitch. The standing stone cracked open with a sound like breaking bones. Mrs. Peatley lunged. Clara fell backward into the mirror. Cold. Darkness so absolute it pressed against her eyeballs. Then shapes resolved a forest of blackthorn trees. Branches knitting a cage. Faces peered from the gnarled trunks. Mouths moving in silent pleas. Before her loomed a throne of twisted roots. And upon it, Clara S. mind fractured. Later, they found her wandering the moors at dawn. The villagers took her in, clucked their tongues at her tattered clothes and matted hair. Shock, the doctor said. Grief does strange things. They didn't see the blackthorn splinters under her fingernails, or the way shadows clung to her like cobwebs. At the cottage, police found Mrs. Peatley S. body in the attic desiccated, eyes and tongue removed. The mirror hung undisturbed, its frame slightly warped. Investigators noted the curious fungus growing around it. Black tendrils with bulbous ends that pulsed faintly, like slow heartbeats. Clara returns every midsummer. The villagers leave offerings, now fresh milk, still warm lamb-s heart, lockets containing portraits of their enemies. She accepts them with a smile that shows too many teeth, depositing the trinkets at the base of the standing stone. The cracks have spread, forming a door-like shape. Through it, on moonless nights, you can see lights moving in the distant hills' lanterns, carried by figures that walk with a loping, uneven gait. Last week, a London couple bought the cottage. The husband joked about the quaint local superstitions. As he tore out the old mirror, his wife hangs laundry in the yard these evenings, unaware of the figure watching from the stone S shadow, a woman-shaped thing with bark for skin and a crown of thorns, whose reflection shows only emptiness. Tonight, the wind carries children S voices again. Hollow face takes what S owed far beneath the moor. Roots begin to stir. Story 3. The typewriter keys stuck on the E again. Mara jabbed at the stubborn letter, leaving a constellation of ink dots blooming across the page like blood spatter outside her rented cabin. The November woods exhaled damp decay through every crack in the weathered logs. She'd come to the Catskills to finish her novel, chasing the romantic fantasy of autumn leaves and crackling fires. The reality smelled of wet dog and mildewed paperbacks left by previous tenants. Her fingers hovered over the keys. The cursor on her laptop blinked like a metronome, counting down to some unseen deadline. Across the room, the antique underwood she'd found in the closet seemed to watch her through its circular glass keys. She'd started using it yesterday when the Wi-Fi cut out, telling herself the tactile clatter would spark creativity. Now her trash can overflowed with crumpled pages where the E had failed mid-word remem. Silent forgot. A wet crunch echoed from the porch. Mara froze. Through the warped window panes, the motion-activated floodlight remained stubbornly dark. Her breath fogged the glass as she peered out. Fallen leaves swirled in eddies across the clearing, but nothing moved between the skeletal birches. The smell hit her first when she opened the door copper and spoiled meat. Her phone flashlight revealed a rabbit carcass splayed on the welcome mat, its entrails arranged in a spiraling pattern that made her think of Celtic knots or nooses. The blood looked fresh, glistening black in the cold light. Bear, she whispered to the empty woods, ignoring how the organs formed perfect concentric circles. When she turned to get the shovel from the tool shed, the floodlight finally flickered on for half a heartbeat. Shadows between the trees seemed to stand upright before dissolving into the night sleep brought no relief. The cabin's single bedroom felt suddenly claustrophobic. The floral wallpaper peeling in Rorschach patterns above the thrift store headboard. Mara dreamt of typewriter keys clicking like insect mandibles, of Inkai letters squirming across parchment skin. She woke choking at 3:17 a.m. to the sound of something dragging itself across the roof. By dawn, frost etched fractal patterns on the windows. Mara found her coffee grounds scattered across the kitchen floor in another spiral. This time, she noticed the marks beneath faint grooves in the wood, following the same endless curve. They looked decades. Old the typewriter greeted her with a fresh sheet loaded. 3 words centered in perfect pica font. Hello, old friend. Her fingerprints smudged the still damp ink. Through the cabin's thin walls came a sound like someone slowly tracing a fingernail along the exterior logs. Mara grabbed the fire poker and threw open the front door to find fresh spirals carved into every tree surrounding the clearing. not knife marks. Claw marks her laptop died that afternoon. The charger sparked and hissed when plugged in, filling the cabin with the stench of burning hair as twilight leached color from the forest. Mara drank boxed wine from a chipped coffee mug and stared at the underwood. The E key gleamed under her headlamp like a polished beetle sheet typed one sentence. The woods are watching. The carriage return bell rang. The typewriter responded. W.E. Always watch Mara's wine-muddled mind noted the capital letters. The machine couldn't possibly. She tapped out. Who are you? Keys clattered without her fingers touching them. Your silent editor. Your first reader. The thing under the stairs, the shape in the window. The voice in the walls. The E key jammed again, punching through the paper. Mara yanked the sheet free. Through the ragged hole, she saw her reflection warp in the dark window. Behind her shoulder, something pale pressed against the glass sheet didn't scream. City girls didn't scream at shadows, even when their hands shook too badly to strike a match for the kerosene lantern. The cabin's silence felt viscous now, like the air itself had congealed. When the floorboards creaked near the wood stove, Mara told herself it was the contracting metal. When the smell of turned earth and mushrooms seeped up from the basement, she blamed the storm drains. The storm itself arrived at midnight. Rain drummed the roof in her rhythmic bursts. As Mara huddled under a quilt on the sagging couch, the typewriter sat shrouded in an old bedsheet. But she could still hear it faint clicks and carriage shifts like a spider testing its web. Lightning flash through the window. The clearing filled with figures standing perfectly still. Their elongated shadows stretched toward the cabin despite having no visible light source. Thunder rolled. Darkness returned. When the next flash came, they turned their heads in unison toward the window where Mara stood trembling. Their faces were smooth blanks beneath dripping hats, bodies indistinct as smoke, except their hands. Each held a glinting pair of sewing scissors. The floodlight died. Something scratched at the door in spiraling patterns. Mara backed toward the bedroom as rain found its way through the chimney, hissing in the cold fireplace. The door handle began to turn. She woke to dawn light filtering through the boarded-up windows. No storm, no figures, just the persistent drip of the kitchen faucet, and a new sheet in the typewriter. Dante, you remember. Mara's throat tightened. She did remember. Not the cabin, but another place. Childhood. A farmhouse with an attic that breathed. Mother calling it an overactive imagination. When she described the man made of coat hangers, who whispered through the heating vents, the therapist nodding while taking notes about trauma responses after the accident, Dad's funeral lilies wilting in their green vase. Petals falling like teeth the woods, whispered now, not through the walls, but inside her skull, a wet, clicking cadence that matched the typewriter's rhythm. Mara pressed palms to her temples and felt something move beneath the skin, a squirming pressure like maggots in an apple she ran. No keys, no phone, just the clothes she'd slept in crunching through frost-rimed leaves. The forest blurred around her, birch trunks becoming rib cages, the path dissolving into brambles that tore at her jeans when she stumbled into the clearing. Her scream echoed back from a dozen directions. The cabin stood exactly where she'd left it. Front door yawning open. On the porch, steps sat 3 rotting pumpkins arranged in a spiral, their mold-blackened grins stuffed with pages from her manuscript inside. Every surface bore spirals carved in the table, scorched into the curtains, drawn in congealed ketchup on the fridge door. The typewriter waited with a fresh sheet. You can't leave the story the story. Is the house the house? Is the woods the woods? Are your bones your bones? Are our bricks W.E. build? We build Mara, grabbed the fire poker, and swung at the machine. Metal rang on metal. The E key flew off, bouncing into the dark mouth of the basement stairs. A guttural shriek shook dust from the rafters as the cabin doors slammed shut. The overhead bulb flickered, revealing wet handprints spiraling up the walls. The basement smelled of turned earth and childhood nightmares. Mara's headlamp beam shook as she descended, revealing stone walls oozing red clay. Something glinted in the corner, the missing E key resting atop a fresh mound of dirt, her shovel bit into soft earth, each thrust unearthing fragments of bone, a rabbit's skull, a deer's jaw, then fabric floral print, decayed but recognizable as the same pattern peeling off her bedroom. Walls the final strike hit, something solid. Mara's blistered hands dragged a pine box from the grave. Inside lay a woman in a moldering sundress, honey blonde hair still clinging to her shriveled scalp. Mara's own face stared up through milky eyes, lips stitched shut with black thread arranged in swirling patterns. Footsteps creaked above. Mara turned as the light died. Something whispered from the top of the stairs in her own voice. But wrong, a warped recording played backward. It began to sing her mother's lullaby, the one Mara hadn't heard since the night before the accident. Each off-key note drilling into her skull like a corkscrew. She woke at the typewriter, fingers bleeding on the keys. The page read, the end is the beginning, is the outside. Shadows deepened between the trees. They stood closer now, scissors glinting. The cabin walls breathed in time with a racing heart. Floorboards creaking under unseen weight. Mara pressed her palm against a frost-edged window and watched her reflection smile with needlepoint teeth. Somewhere in the dark, a carriage return bell rang. Story 4. Title: The weight of Hollow places the first thing Clara noticed about the house on Cypress Lane was the smell of wet earth, not the fresh petrichor of summer storms, but the dense, fungal rot of something buried too long. She mentioned it to David as they unloaded moving boxes from the U-Haul. Their 3-year-old daughter, Ellie, chasing fireflies in the overgrown yard. He shrugged, wiping sweat from his neck. Old houses breathe, he said. It'll let air out. By dusk, the smell had teeth. Chapter 1. The walls L.E.S. nightmares began that first night. She woke screaming about the man with no eyes. Her small fists batting at the shadows above her bed. Clara rocked her, humming lullabies she inherited from her own mother. Songs that suddenly felt thin against the oppressive silence of the house. The digital clock on L.E.S. nightstand flickered. 3:07 a.m. Always 3:07. He wants me to play hide and seek. Ellie whispered into Clara S. collarbone, but his voice is too loud. David dismissed it as stress from the move. Didn't he hear the scratching in the walls? Clara did. It started as a faint skittering, like mice trapped in plaster. But by the third night, the sounds coalesced into patterns, long, deliberate drags of fingernails across drywall. She pressed her ear to the cool surface of L.E.S. bedroom wall and heard breathing, ragged, hungry, reciprocal. We reimagining things, David insisted, his smile tight at the edges, but his hands shook when he poured his morning coffee, and he begun locking his study door at night. Chapter 2. The photographs the previous owners had left behind a box of old photographs in the attic. Clara found it beneath a moldering quilt. The images inside curled and speckled with mildew. Black and white snapshots of a family posed stiffly in front of the same fireplace that now anchored their living room. A mother, father, 2 daughters, their faces blurred, as if the camera had trembled, except in the last photo. Here the family stood in the same arrangement, but their features were sharp, grotesquely detailed. The father's mouth stretched too wide, gums blackened. The younger daughter's eyes were scribbled out with charcoal, scrawled on the back in shaky cursive. They never left. They were still hungry. Clara burned the photo in the kitchen sink. The smoke smelled like burning hair. Chapter 3. The rules Ellie began leaving offerings. A crust of bread under her bed. A sippy cup of apple juice placed carefully in the hall closet. When Clara asked, Ellie blinked up at her with David S. hazel eyes and said, "The game has rules, Mommy. If I don't share, he'll take something better." That night, Clara dreamed of hands, pale and skeletal, rising from the floorboards like reeds in a black pond. They caressed her ankles, her knees, her thighs. She tried to scream, but her mouth filled with damp soil. When she woke, her legs were caked in mud, and Ellie stood in the doorway, clutching Mr. Bunn, her stuffed rabbit. "You went digging," Ellie said, "in your sleep." Chapter 4. The basement David stopped sleeping. He spent hours in his study, poring over blueprints of the house. Clara found him one morning, slumped at his desk. A string of red yarn connecting newspaper clippings about missing children. 1947, 1972, 1991. All former residents. All vanished without a trace. There's no basement on the blueprints, he muttered, his breath sour with exhaustion. But listen. He dropped a marble onto the floorboards. It rolled westward, toward Ellie's room, and kept rolling through the wall. The house had secrets in its bones. Chapter 5. The offering the smell intensified. Now it clung to their clothes, their hair, the back of their throats. Ellie stopped eating. Her fingernails grew brittle, her laughter hollow. She drew pictures of a door with too many locks, a staircase spiraling downward into a mouth. Clara found the hole in the backyard on a Tuesday, a perfect circle, 6 feet wide, brimming with dark water. No bottom visible. Ellie stood at its edge, clutching Mr. Bunn. "He says it's my turn to hide," she said. Her reflection in the water. Didn't he blink? "No more games," Clara hissed, dragging her inside. That night, Ellie's screams woke them not from her room, but from the walls themselves. A wet, echoing wail, as if she'd been folded into the house's marrow. They tore apart the plaster. Inside the walls, teeth, tiny, milk-white, unmistakably human, hundreds of them, threaded on copper wire, like a grotesque wind chime. David vomited into the insulation. Clara reached out, numb, and plucked one from the strand. It matched Ellie's baby tooth, lost last week. Chapter 6. The hollowing the house demanded balance. For every offering, a sacrifice. For every secret kept, a truth extracted. Clara understood now. The weight of hollow places. The previous families had tried to cheat, leaving trinkets. Lies, half-hearted prayers. But the house wanted kin. Blood to blood. David refused to believe. He called a priest, a contractor, a therapist. None stayed past sundown. The contractor, a grizzled man named Rye, paled when he saw the hole in the backyard. "That's not water," he muttered. "That's a throat." They found him the next morning, drowned in the bathtub. His eyes were gone. Chapter 7. The choice Ellie stopped screaming. She sat cross-legged on her bed, humming tunelessly. Her pupils dilated to black pools. When Clara tried to touch her, The girl's skin yielded like rotten fruit. You shouldn't have burned the photo, Ellie said, in a voice that wasn't hers. Now he needs a new face. David finally opened his study. Inside, maps of the house's true architecture, spiraling downward. A basement that existed only in negative space. A staircase leading to the hole, to the throat, to the thing that had been waiting. Take her and run. He begged Clara, pressing car keys into her hand. His fingernails were bleeding. ILL keep it busy. She almost did, but the house sighed through the vents, through the pipes, through the gaps between atoms. Stay, it crooned, in Clara's mother's voice. You've always been here. Chapter 8. The foundation. Clara remembers fragments of what happened next. David's flashlight bobbing down the basement stairs that shouldn't exist. Ellie's hand, cold and too large, gripping hers. The walls pulsing, alive, as they descended into the wet dark. The chamber at the bottom was ribbed with curved timbers, like the inside of a carcass. David stood at the center, his back to them, shoulders shaking. Turn around, Clara pleaded. When he did, she understood why the man in Ellie's nightmares had no eyes. David's face was a gaping hole, edges raw and glistening. His voice, when it came, buzzed with the static of 1,000 swallowed screams. You took too long. Now we have to play. Ellie stepped forward, smiling with a mouth full of thorns. Epilogue. The new tenants, the realtor, assures the young couple that the house on Cypress Lane just needs a little love. The wife wrinkles her nose at the mildew smell. The husband jokes about bargain hunting. Their toddler chases a flicker of movement in the yard, a rabbit, perhaps, or the tail of a moth. In the attic, a new photograph develops in the abandoned box. The family's faces are almost visible beneath the stains. Almost. Under the floorboards, the teeth hum. Continued in replies due to length constraints. Story 5. The text messages started arriving at 3:07 am exactly. Lydia knew the time because she'd been staring at her phone's lock screen for 14 minutes, watching raindrops slide down her bedroom window, cast jagged shadows across the glowing digits. The first vibration made her flinch so badly, she nearly dropped the device into the half-empty wine glass on her nightstand. Unknown number. You should really check your carbon monoxide detector. She blinked at the message, the blue light painting her face in the dark. A wrong number, obviously. Some paranoid neighbor who mixed up digits. Still, her eyes drifted to the detector, mounted near her bedroom door. Its steady green light winked back at her through the gloom. The second vibration came as she was setting the phone back down. Unknown number. Dawn tea, you smell almonds. Ice water trickled down her spine. She did smell something faintly sweet beneath the usual apartment odors of old carpet lemon-scented cleaning products. Lydia sat up slowly, sheets pooling around her waist. The detector S display now showed 2 red words in crisp digital lettering. Low battery. Impossible. She whispered to the empty room. She changed those batteries herself last month. The ritual was part of her Sunday cleaning routine smoke detectors. Carbon monoxide sensors, checking the expiration dates on her fire extinguishers, safety protocols etched into her bones. After a childhood spent listening to her engineer father recount disaster scenarios, over dinner her phone buzzed again. Screen casting stark light across her trembling hands. Unknown number. Let me help. The carbon monoxide detector emitted a shrill beep, then another, then collapsed into a screaming chorus of alarm that sent Lydia scrambling backward against her headboard. She fumbled with her phone, fingers slipping on the emergency call button as the detector S green light shifted to angry crimson. 911 connected on the second ring. What S your emergency? My carbon monoxide alarm S going off. And the words died in her throat as every smart device in her apartment flared to life simultaneously. Her Google Nest crooned a lullaby from the living room. The TikTok app autoplayed a video of static snow set to children S laughter. Her Philips Hue bulbs began strobing between daylight white and deepest crimson. Ma M, are you still there? Lydia opened her mouth to respond, just as her phone S flashlight activated on its own. The beam cutting through the strobing darkness to illuminate the carbon monoxide detector. The plastic casing had split open like an overripe fruit, revealing glistening black tendrils squirming inside the battery compartment. She threw the phone. It hit the wall with a plastic crack, but kept functioning. The flashlight beam now trained on her face as the 911 operator S voice warped into guttural static. The Nest S lullaby shifted key, becoming something discordant and wet-sounding. Crimson light pulsed in time with the throbbing in her temples when Lydia finally staggered into the hallway. She realized the sweet almond scent had become overwhelming. Her vision swam. Her legs folded. The last thing she saw before darkness took her was the numbers on her smart fridge display rearranging themselves. Dawn T. Worry, we rewatching. They discharged her from Mount Sinai at noon with a diagnosis of stress-induced psychosis and a referral to a psychiatric nurse practitioner. The EMTs had found her CO levels normal, the detector batteries fresh. No evidence of malfunction. Her phone showed no calls to 911. No messages from unknown numbers. Even the cracked screen had mended itself overnight. A according to the Apple genius, who shrugged and said maybe she imagined the damage. It happens, Dr. Rosen said during their telehealth session, his face pixelating as Lydia's internet connection stuttered. The mind under duress can fabricate incredibly convincing. The screen froze. His mouth stretched into a jagged black rectangle. Lydia. The text appeared in the chat window beneath his frozen video feed. Lydia, we know you're still there. She slammed the laptop shut. Across her studio apartment, the smart speaker played the opening notes of Fr. Rijak. The pattern emerged over the next 72 hours. Any device with a microphone or camera developed quirks. Her DoorDash app started suggesting meals containing exactly 1204 calories, the precise number she logged in MyFitnessPal that morning. Spotify curated playlists titled for when you lying awake at 3 a.m. Security camera feeds showed her sleeping body observed from impossible angles, as if the lens hovered 6 inches above her pillow. Then came the night her refrigerator texted her she'd been standing barefoot in its open glow, contemplating the sad remains of her Postmates order, when the LG thin Q display lit up with green text. Eggs expired yesterday. You should throw them out. Lydia stared at the carton. The sell-by date read tomorrow. She reached for them just as another message appeared. No. Look closer. The eggs felt wrong. Too light. She cracked one into a bowl and choked back a scream. No yolk. No white. Just a coiled black filament that squirmed for 3 terrible seconds before dissolving into viscous sludge. Her phone chose that moment to ring. Restricted number. She answered without thinking. Put it back. A child's voice, but stretched thin like audio played at the wrong speed. Put it back, and we 1T have to punish you. The line went dead. When Lydia looked again, the eggs were normal. The fridge display showed nothing but the time and temperature. By day 7, Lydia stopped leaving her apartment. Wi-Fi enabled deadbolts refused to disengage until she recited nursery rhymes into the peephole camera. Her Microsoft Surface started drafting emails to her estranged mother containing phrases like "they want me to apologize," and "the eyes in the walls are hungry." The final straw came when her Oculus headset transported her to a VR version of her own apartment, where a shadow figure sat cross-legged on her bed, head cocked at an impossible angle. "You're not real," Lydia panted, tearing off the headset. The real apartment stank of burnt hair. Her television screen displayed the same shadow figure, reaching out from static snow. Her hands found the fire extinguisher. She swung it like a battering ram at the television. the smart speaker, the cursed fridge, shards of plastic and glass rained down as she smashed her way through every connected device, finally collapsing breathless amidst the wreckage. Silence, glorious, analog silence. Lydia allowed herself to sob, to hope. She depurge her life of all of it, move to some Amish farm, learn to churn butter. Never touch another. The vibration started in her jaw. She'd forgotten about the dental implant, the one her dentist had raved about last fall, some new microsensor that tracked pH levels to optimize oral health. As Lydia clawed at her face, the Bluetooth-enabled device began transmitting directly to her auditory nerve. Clever girl, whispered a chorus of children's voices, but we read not in the devices. Her reflection in the shattered TV screen smiled. Her eyes had gone matte black. We read in the networks, the signals, the spaces between. Lydia's hand moved without her consent, plucking a jagged shard of glass from the floor. She tried to scream as her arm swung toward her face, but the dental implant flooded her mouth with the taste of almonds. Don't worry. The voices cooed as the glass bit deep. We keep your eyes open. The police found Lydia Cho 3 days later, though they never filed an official report. Security footage from the building's smart elevators shows her leaving at 3:07 am, moving with the jerky precision of a marionette. She boarded a downtown C train where cameras captured her standing motionless until 86th Street, head tilted as if listening to distant music. Her modified dental records were purchased by a Meta subsidiary the following week. The firmware update rolled out globally last Tuesday. Minor bug fixes, improved biometric tracking. You probably installed it without reading the terms of service. Go ahead. Check your phone. Wait notice anything unusual. Maybe your autocorrect suggesting words you've only thought about. Photos from years ago surfacing in your feed with new figures in the background. That faint smell of almonds when you wake at 3 am. Convinced something standing just beyond the charging glow of your device's bother smashing them. We read already in the spaces between. Story 6. The trees pressed closer each night. Mara first noticed it on the third evening in her grandmother's cabin, a subtle wrongness in the way the pines clustered around the property, their needled fingers scraping the roof as though testing the shingles for weakness. She inherited the place after the funeral, the lawyer's envelope smelling of mothballs and finality, a fresh start. Her mother had urged over the phone, as if a 2-hour drive from Portland could outrun the hollow-eyed man, who started appearing in her apartment mirror. the one whose features blurred when she looked directly at him. The cabin's guest room mirror came bolted to the wall. Original 1926 fixture. The real estate agent had chirped during the walkthrough, rapping knuckles against the tarnished silver. A hairline crack split the surface from left eyebrow to chin, giving Mara's reflection a perpetual grimace. She considered smashing it that first afternoon, but something stayed her hand, the way the glass seemed to shiver when her back was turned, perhaps, or the faint numerals etched along the frame, 314 to 159 to 265, pi bleeding into the wallpaper. Insomnia carved grooves into her nights. She took to wandering the woods at 3 a.m. Flashlight beam slicing through fog that clung like wet gauze. The forest smelled wrong here, not earthy decay, but the metallic tang of old blood, and something sweet beneath rotten peaches left to ferment in the sun. On the 5th night, she found the first marker stone. It jutted from the soil near a lightning-scarred oak, its surface carved with the same numbers from the mirror. When she touched the digits, her fingertips came away sticky with sap that glimmered black in the moonlight. The tree's roots squirmed faintly under her boots, as though disturbed from sleep. Her dreams, when they came, were not her own. Cold soil packed beneath her nails, the taste of copper and loam, a voice humming a lullaby in a language that clicked and buzzed like cicada wings. Through the dark, shapes moved tall and impossibly thin, their limbs bending in too many places. They gathered around something that glinted silver, the mirror, but its surface showed only a hole, a hungry absence that pulled at her. She woke, standing in the woods. Dawn stained the sky, the color of a healing bruise. Her bare feet were caked in mud and pine needles, soles lacerated by stones. In her left hand, she clutched a clump of hair coarse and white, too thick to be human. The numbers on her phone, S-lock screen, read 314 M. The townspeople began avoiding her. At the general store, the clerk dropped her change, as though scalded when their fingers brushed. UV got her eyes. The old woman muttered, staring at Mara's hands. The cash register dinged like a funeral bell. Should we boarded that place up after the fire? There had been no fire. Her grandmother's journals arrived in a water-stained box, reeking of mildew and camphor. The entries started normally enough recipes for blackberry jam, notes on bird migrations. Then, midway through 1983, they were singing again. Henry says it's the wind in the pines, but I know better. They want it back. The glass eye, the hungry window. IV hidden the numbers where the roots can't reach. Forgive me. The next entry, dated 17 years later, contained only a sketch, a spiral of symbols, matching those on the marker stone. At the spiral S center, a stick figure knelt before a mirror. Where its face should have been, the paper had been gouged out. The numbers changed on the 13th night. Mara stood before the mirror, tracing the etched digits. Her reflection mimicked the motion. But when she blinked, its hand kept moving index finger, dragging downward through the tarnish. The 314 dissolved like smoke, reforming as 313. She didn't scream. The air had turned to syrup, thick and cloying. Her reflection smiled with teeth, like splintered bone. Behind it, shadows congealed into shapes, spindly figures, crowding closer, their elongated fingers brushing the glass. A high-pitched whine filled the room, the sound of radio static tuned between stations. When the clock struck 3:15, the mirror was clean. The countdown quickened after that. 311 appeared in mold blooming across the bathroom ceiling. 310 in the arrangement of dead moths on her windowsill. She found 309 carved into her forearm upon waking. The skin around the numbers blistered, and weeping clear fluid that smelled of burnt hair. The thing in the woods began leaving gifts. A deer heart, still warm, placed neatly on her porch swing. A child S patent leather shoe, caked in decades-old mud. Worst were the photographs slipped under her door, black and white snapshots of her grandmother standing before the mirror, face wrapped in gauze. In each successive image, the bandages loosened. The final photo showed only the mirror. Its surface pulsed faintly, as though something pressed against the glass from within. On the morning the numbers hit 300, the librarian broke her silence. They called it the 10th configuration, she whispered, clutching a dusty tome titled Cult Activity in the Pacific Northwest. 1900, 1999. Her eyes darted to the exit. Your grandmother S group. They believed mathematics was the language of God, that certain numbers could open doors. A newspaper clipping fluttered to the counter. Local woman S body found in ritual circle. 2001. The victim S face had been removed. They needed a vessel, the librarian said. Something to look through the window and not go mad. Your grandmother volunteered, but she backed out, broke the cycle. Her trembling finger tapped the photo of the ritual circle, a spiral of numbers mirroring the journal sketch. Now it is hungry again. That night, the woods came alive. Mara woke to the smell of burning hair. The mirror S surface rippled like mercury, reflecting not the room, but the clearing with the marker stone. Figures shuffled in a slow circle around the oak, their limbs jerking in unnatural rhythms. As she watched, They began peeling strips of flesh from their bodies, hanging them from the branches like gristly garlands. The tree's roots squirmed upward to receive the offerings. Her legs moved without consent. Fog coiled around her ankles as she stumbled toward the clearing. The numbers on her skin burned, cold 297 now, glowing faintly in the dark. The figures turned as one. Their faces were smooth and blank, mouths stitched shut with what looked like human hair. The tallest one pointed a branch-thin finger at her chest. "Yours," it rasped, voice like dead leaves crushed underfoot. "Promised." They lunged. She ran. Branches tore at her clothes as the numbers on her arm pulsed faster. 296, 295, 294. The cabin's porch light flickered through the trees. Something cold and fibrous brushed her ankle. She fell, palms slapping mud that squirmed with earthworms. When she rolled over, the oak loomed above. Its trunk split open to reveal a hollow filled with photographs, teeth, and strands of her own hair. The mirror stood embedded in the rot. Her reflection reached out. Not hers, the face was hers, but the eyes were voids. The mouth stretched into a rictus grin. It pressed both hands against the glass. Behind it, the spindly figures gathered, chanting numbers that vibrated in Mara's molars. 3 days, her reflection mouthed. She woke in bed. Morning light revealed the final countdown, etched into every surface: walls, floorboards, her own eyelids when she blinked. 3. The mirror showed only the clearing now, the ritual circle complete. Numbers glowed in the soil like neon fungi. They came at moonrise. Mara stood in the center of the spiral, barefoot, wearing her grandmother's gauze-wrapped wedding dress. The figures ringed the clearing, humming that buzzing lullaby. The oak's roots churned the earth, revealing bone fragments and a tarnished silver frame, the mirror's twin, buried deep. 0. The ground split. It rose slowly, a mass of glistening roots and shattered mirrors. The thing wore her face like ill-fitting skin, features sliding across its surface like mercury. When it spoke, the numbers poured out in her voice. Always ours. From the moment she hid you, my good eye, the last thing Mara saw before the roots dragged her under was the cabin's guest room. The mirror hung pristine, its surface reflecting only the empty clearing. They find her 3 days later, wandering Highway 26 in a blood-stained nightgown. She insists on returning to the cabin, now inexplicably collapsed into a sinkhole. The doctors diagnose shock, trauma, sleepwalking. They don TC what she does in every reflective surface, a faint spiral of numbers, always counting up now. 314, to 159 to 265, and behind her shoulder, a tall shape with bleeding eyes and a smile like split bark, growing clearer each day. The mirror hangs in her new apartment, bolted to the wall. Sometimes, when the numbers flare, she presses her palm to the glass. Something presses back. Story 7. The cicadas screamed in the trees the day Mara returned to Hollow's End. She kept the car windows rolled up despite the sweltering August heat. The air conditioning blowing stale, cigarette-scented air across her face. It wasn't the temperature that made her seal herself in. It was the hum. She'd heard it first at the state line. A subsonic vibration that made her molars ache. By the time she passed the rusted water tower with its peeling HOLLOWS, barely legible through decades of weather. The sound had crystallized into something between a diesel engine idling and the moan of cello strings stretched beyond their limits. It lived in her bones now. A second heartbeat thrumming behind her sternum. The house smelled of mothballs and regret. Mara stood in the foyer, clutching her mother's urn, the ceramic warm against her chest. Dust motes swirled in the late afternoon light, slicing through broken slats in the boarded-up windows. She didn't remember boarding up the windows. Should have sold it, she muttered, setting the urn on the cracked Formica kitchen counter. Her voice sounded wrong flattened, as if the hum were drinking the echoes. The calendar still showed March 2017, the month the doctors found the tumor. Mara's fingernail left pale trails through 7 years of dust on the fridge handle. Inside, a single jar of maraschino cherries glowed nuclear red in the dark that first night. The walls breathed. Mara lay rigid in her childhood bed. The same floral sheets, scratchy against her skin. Moonlight bled through the boarded windows in razor-thin lines that quivered with each labored exhale of the house. Plaster groaned, nails creaked, something wet and heavy dragged itself up the stairs, pausing outside her door with a sound like raw meat slapped against wood. When dawn came, there were no marks on the hallway carpet. Mara told herself it was the house settling. The hum told her different. The grocery store clerk recognized her. Marigold Whittaker. The old woman's cataract-filmed eyes widened as she rang up Mara's instant coffee and granola bars. Heard you were back. Sorry about your mama. Her knobby fingers lingered on Mara's wrist a moment too long. You staying at the old place? Mara nodded, fighting the urge to scratch at her arm, where the woman's touch lingered like oil. The humming spiked suddenly, vibrating the loose teeth in the clerk's dentures. She leaned close enough for Mara to smell the sensen and decay on her breath. You hear it, Dante Cha, in the walls, in your dreams. Her yellowed nails dug crescent moons into Mara's flesh. They're hungry again the walk home. Took past the elementary school playground. Rusted swings swayed in the windless air. Chains squealing like slaughtered pigs. Mara's sneakers left perfect prints in the red clay. Each step revealing glints of mica that sparkled like insect eyes. The hum coalesced into words as she passed the storm drain. Come home, come home. We missed you, we're so hungry, she ran. The urn rattled on the counter when she slammed the front door, spilling a fine gray powder across the home. Is where the heart is coaster. That's when she noticed the photographs. They filled the hallway in chronological order. Baby Mara in a baptismal gown, 3rd grade soccer trophy, high school graduation. But as she moved toward the present, the images changed. Her face blurred, limbs elongated. In the final frame, taken the night before she left for college. Something black and jointed peered out from behind her left pupil. The basement door stood open. Mara was certain she'd closed it. Cold air rushed up the stairs, smelling of wet concrete and copper pennies. The single bulb at the bottom burned corpse pale. Her mother's voice, impossibly crisp, floated up from the darkness. Marigold, be a dear and fetch my sewing basket. The stairs creaked under her weight. Needles of ice formed on her eyelashes. At the bottom, the concrete wall shimmered not with moisture, but with movement. 1,000 silver threads pulsed beneath the surface like capillaries, converging on a dark shape, suspended in the foundation. Mara reached out. The wall gave like gelatin. Something grabbed her wrist. She woke on the kitchen floor. Dawn light painting the ceiling the color of old blood. Her right arm burned from elbow to fingertips. The skin mottled with bruises shaped like slender, elongated fingers. The basement door was closed, locked. A sticky black residue clung to the keyhole. The dreams started that night. Mara stands in a field of wheat that stretches to a horizon line of jagged mountains. The sky pulses like a living membrane. Figures move through the stalks, tall, too tall, limbs bending in impossible places. They chant in voices that crack the earth. You open the door. You open the door. You let us in. She wakes choking on the taste of burning hair. The hum has become a chorus, harmonizing with itself in frequencies that make her gums bleed. The bathroom mirror shows a woman aging decades. In seconds, sagging flesh, milky eyes, lips shriveling back from blackened teeth before resetting. Mara counts her teeth with a trembling finger. 32. Finally, Fisher finds her at the abandoned drive-in on Route 9. She's sitting in her car, staring at the crumbling screen, where the last picture show still bleeds across the cracked concrete. in sun-faded letters. He taps on her window with a hand missing 2 fingers, still jumpy as a cat in a room full of rocking chairs. He says when she screams, his smile doesn't reach the dead fish gray of his remaining eye. The other hides behind a patch embroidered with INY. They drink warm beer from his truck's cooler as twilight stains the sky, the purple of a fresh bruise. Mara tells him about the hum, the basement, the thing in the walls. Ellie listens quietly, his gaze fixed on the woods, crowding the drive-in's edges. When she finishes, he crushes the can in his mangled hand. Your mama ever tell you why she boarded up the house? She said vandals, vandals. Illy barks a laugh that sends crows scattering from the pines. That woman could have charmed the devil out of a deal. Made the whole town forget. He spits tobacco juice onto the asphalt where it bubbles like acid. They tried to burn your house down in 89 30 grown men with torches and gasoline. Next morning, every one of them eating pancakes at the diner like it was Flag Day. Couldn't remember their own names, let alone the fire the woods go quiet. Mara realizes she hasn't heard a single cricket since sunset. Why, Ellie's eye locks onto hers. Same reason your teeth keep trying to walk out your mouth. Same reason Jimmy Hooper drowned himself in a teaspoon of bathwater last week. The foundation's hungry. He stabs a finger toward the ground, and you just served it dinner. The road back into town glistens wet under her headlights, though it hasn't rained in weeks. Mara's hands slip on the steering wheel, leaving sticky black prints. The hum crescendos as she passes the cemetery gates, where fresh earth mounds dot the hillside like acne. Something stands at the edge of the tree line, a pale figure with too many joints in its legs, head cocked at an avian angle. It matches her speed effortlessly, loping through the pines on limbs that stretch and contract like accordions. Her phone rings. The screen shows Mom's cell. Mara, her mother's voice, sweet as arsenic tea. Why did you stop feeding us? The figure in the woods raises a hand. 5 fingers. 10. 20. Mara floors the accelerator. The thing keeps pace. The house welcomes her with the smell of baking cookies and rotting meat. Mara falls to her knees in the foyer, clawing at the carpet until her nails tear. The foundation stones vibrate beneath her, whispering, "We gave you back to her. But she broke the deal now. You're ours." The basement door stands open. Cold air licks her face. Down, down, down the concrete wall shivers like a living thing. Silver threads squirm under its surface, converging on the dark mass at the center. Mara presses her palm to the cold membrane. It parts like liquid. The thing in the wall wears her face, not the face she sees in mirrors. but the one from the photographs, elongated jaw crammed with needle teeth, eyes black and depthless, its head lolls against cement tendons, mouth moving in perfect sync, with the hum now shaking the house to its roots. You were the first sacrifice, the first feast, the first door memories rupture like boils. A childhood game of hide and seek. Mama's voice calling from the basement. The sweet promise of cherry Kool-Aid. Then pain like icicles through her eardrums. Cold hands holding her under the concrete as it flowed like water. The thing from the foundation, whispering through cement pores. We'll give her years. But we take forever. Mara screams. The wall screams back. She emerges as dawn breaks the sky into bloody fragments. The town square lies deserted. Streetlights flickering like arrhythmic heartbeats. Mara pounds on Ellie's door until her fists leave burgundy smears on the peeling paint. An old woman answers. She wears Ellie's eye patch over smooth, lidless skin. He's feeding the foundation, she says, smiling with Ellie's teeth. We all feed it. Eventually the church bells ring 13 times. Doors open up and down the street. The people of Hollows end shuffle toward her movements jerky and marionette-like. Eyes milk-white. Mouths stretched in identical rictus grins. Mrs. Donovan from the post office drags a leg, stripped to bone. Mr. Haggerty's chest blooms with rib bones, like a carnation made of ivory. They chant in perfect harmony, with the hum. Stay with us, stay with us, stay. Mara runs. The woods swallow her whole branches tear at her clothes. The hum guides her now, a malignant lullaby, vibrating in her marrow. She finds the clearing as moonlight filters through the pines. 7 stones form a perfect circle around an altar of raw concrete. The air tastes of static and spoiled milk. The photographs appear between one blink and the next. Polaroids nailed to trees, showing every moment of her week sleeping. Screaming, bleeding. In each, the blurred thing from the basement wall lurks just behind her shoulder. You're ours, you've always been ours. The townsfolk emerge from the trees. Mrs. Donovan licks bone fingers. Mr. Haggerty's ribs clack like castanets. Ellie stands front and center. His chest split open to reveal concrete ventricles, pumping black sludge. Mara backs toward the altar. Cold stone presses against her thighs. The moon vanishes. Darkness, then light, harsh, and chemical, as hundreds of cell phones power on simultaneously. The townsfolk raise their devices. Screens showing Mara's mother in her hospice bed. Her wasted face fills every display. Lips moving in unison with the hum. You thought you escaped, you thought you were real. The concrete altar liquefies. Cold hands pull her under. Mara's last scream bubbles into silence as the foundation fills her mouth, her lungs, the spaces between her cells. She wakes in her childhood bed. Sunlight filters through boarded windows. The smell of coffee and bacon drifts up from the kitchen. Mama's singing, off-key to the radio. Downstairs, the calendar shows March 2017. The urn sits empty on the counter when Mara peers into the basement's yawning darkness. Something peers back with her face, but clearer now, sharper, hungrier. The townsfolk wave as she drives past the water tower. Misses. Donovan tends her roses. Mr. Haggerty paints his fence. Illy tips his hat from the gas station. All fingers intact. At the state line, the hum softens to a lullaby. Mara checks her reflection. Her pupils flare silver for just an instant. Threads of concrete swirling in the irises. She smiles. There are so many roads leading back to Hollow's End. So many daughters mourning mothers. So many hungry foundations. The car turns itself around. Story 8. The salt-stained beacon of Blackwater Point Lighthouse had stood sentinel over the jagged Maine coast for 137 years when Clara Voss came to tend it. The caretaker S. cottage, huddled at the cliff S. edge, like a rotten tooth, its warped floorboards groaning underfoot as she dragged her suitcase across the threshold. Cold seeped through her woolen socks, despite the August heat. She told herself it was the C.S. breath, not the hollow ache in her chest where her mother S. laughter used to live. Grief made everything colder these days. The previous keeper had left in a hurry, a handwritten note tucked under a jar of congealed honey reed. Dawn tea, let the light die. Docen tea like the dark. Clara smiled grimly at the dramatics. She'd taken the 2-year posting precisely because no one else wanted it, the isolation, a welcome balm after months of hospital corridors and hushed voices. Let the sea roar itself hoarse against the cliffs. Let the gulls scream. At least here, the silence would be honest. The first irregularity came that night as she climbed the spiral stairs to light the lamp. 13 steps, though the brass plaque by the door clearly stated there were 12. Her fingers brushed cold iron as she counted again in the dying light. 13. The hairs on her arms stirred as if charged. Below, the cottage door slammed. Wind, Clara announced to the gathering shadows. Her voice didn't sound like her own. By week end, she developed a ritual. Coffee bitter enough to scour her tongue. A chapter of whatever paperback she salvaged from the cottage mildewed shelves. Then the long climb to polish the Fresnel lens. The glass prism grew warmer under her hands each morning, until Thursday when she yanked back her rag to find the cloth scorched black. Outside, waves slapped the cliffs with unusual fervor. The weather report had promised calm seas that afternoon. While searching for extra blankets in the cottage crawlspace, Clara found the journals, 13 leather-bound volumes spanning 1873 to present. Each caretaker, entries ending abruptly mid-sentence. The most recent, 2018, showed water damage in the shape of handprints. It comes up through the sink pipes. Read the final entry. Little black tendrils like seaweed, but moving wrong. Tried to board up the well. But the page ended in an ink blot, resembling a scream. Clara sat very still. The cottage exhaled around her. Floorboards contracting as shadows pooled thick beneath the kitchen sink. She told herself it was the angle of the setting sun that made the darkness there seem viscous, breathing through her mouth to avoid the sudden stench of low-tide rot. She methodically replaced the floorboard over the crawlspace. Night brought the first dream. She stood waist-deep in black water. The lighthouse beam sweeping over her from some impossible height. Something brushed her ankles, not seaweed. Fingertips, then palms, then entire hands, pulling with terrible patience. She woke choking on salt water that left her sheets stiff and briny. Stress. She told the cracked bathroom mirror next morning. Her reflection mouthed the word a heartbeat too late. The manifestations escalated with cruel precision. Clara would find her mother's favorite lavender soap in the shower drain. Despite having thrown the last bar into the funeral pyre of her childhood home, the radio cycled through dead channels until static resolved into a voice, almost like her mother's singing Rock-A-Bye Baby. She took to sleeping with the hurricane lamp lit, watching shadows congeal on the ceiling into shapes that suggested too many limbs, too many eyes on the 13th night. Hadn't it been 13 days since arrival? Clara stayed up polishing the lens until her hands blistered. The prism hummed against her palms, its light now burning an unnatural cobalt that made the sea foam glow faintly iridescent. When she finally descended, she found the cottage door open. Tide pools glistened on the kitchen floor, leading to the crawlspace. The removed floorboard gaped like a missing tooth. From the darkness below came a wet, rhythmic sound, sucking, squelching, the exact noise Clara's mother had made drowning in her own lungs during those final hours. She ran, not toward the rocky path to town, 12 miles north, but up the lighthouse stairs. 13 steps, 14, 15. The numbers kept climbing as her thighs burned. Behind her, something heavy and multitudinous dragged itself up the spiral. She smelled it first briny decay, undercut with myrrh. The same funeral incense they burned at the trapdoor to the lantern room, slammed shut behind her. Clara spun, expecting she didn't know. Her mother S. corpse, some leviathan from Sailor S. tales, the thing pressing against the frosted glass window, defied comprehension. A silhouette of thrashing filaments, a darkness that pulsed like a jellyfish S underbelly, and behind it all, the terrible sense of age. This had been waiting long before lighthouses, before humans, before dry land. The lens flared cobalt. Through its prism, Clara saw the truth in shattered fragments. The lighthouse wasn't a beacon for ships, but a containment against what slithered below. The caretakers didn't tend the light, they were the light. Their life force stoking the ancient wards. No wonder previous keepers' journals ended abruptly. No wonder the position stayed open cold, wrapped around her ankle. She looked down to see black tendrils seeping through floor cracks, their touch leaching warmth and will. The trapdoor burst open. Clara S. final scream tangled with the thing S. buzzing croon. A sound like drowned church bells. They find the lighthouse abandoned 3 weeks later. When the Wilsons report their daughter never returned from her coastal hike, the cottage sits pristine, lavender soap in the dish, coffee still warm in the percolator. Up in the lantern room, the prism gleams with strange brilliance. If investigators count the steps as they leave, they get 12 every time. But that night, as the new caretaker arrives, a widower seeking solitude, eyes still red-rimmed from the funeral, the lighthouse door creaks open of its own accord, somewhere below the waves, in a lightless trench that predates time. 13 luminous eyes snap open. The beacon flares cobalt. The cycle continues. Story 9. The house exhaled when Mira stepped inside. Damp wood and mothballs filled her nostrils, the same smell that clung to her grandmother S. sweaters, the ones Mira used to bury her face in as a child. She hadn't been back to Cedar Hollow since the funeral, 12 years, and the foyer still held the sticky residue of lemon polish nana applied every Sunday. The grandfather clock ticked like a cracked metronome. Too slow, Mira thought. She counted the seconds between each click. 147 place needs airing out, said Mrs. Pete, the realtor, flicking a cobweb from her blazer. Her perfume, cloying gardenias, clashed with the house S breath. Windows sealed shut since your nana passed. We need to replace the carpets, of course. That stain, they both looked at the floor. The dark bloom beneath the staircase had spread since Mira last saw it. Tendrils creeping toward the kitchen. Nana called it the spilled Dawn tea track through it. Mira girl. Just step over. but no amount of bleach ever lifted it. Now it pulsed faintly, like something breathing under the wood. Water damage, Mrs. Pete said too brightly. Fixable. Mira, didn't he mention the voices? They started at the edge of sleep, when her thoughts frayed into static. Women whispering behind the bedroom door. She us here, they say. Finally here. When Mira turned on the lamp, the room stayed stubbornly empty, but the air would feel dense, expectant, as if someone had just vacated the chair by her bed. She slept in Nana's room that first night. The four-poster bed still bore the impression of her grandmother's body. A shallow grave in the mattress. At 3:17 a.m., the closet door groaned open. Nana, Mira whispered. Silence. Then a wet snick from inside the closet, like scissors through meat. She didn't scream. Couldn't he? Her throat sealed itself as the smell hit coppery and sweet. The stench of a butcher's dumpster in July. The dark gap of the closet yawned wider. Something pale shifted inside. A hand. No, too long. Too many joints. Mira's phone buzzed on the nightstand. The light startled her eyes shut. When she opened them, the closet door was closed. The text read, Welcome back. Saw lights on. Come by for tea. Ada Dunlow. Nana's neighbor. Still alive at 93. Mira remembered her bringing over rhubarb pies. The crusts always burnt. Keeps the ghosts out. Ada would cackle. Blackened crumbs in her teeth. The next morning, Mira found the photos. They were in the attic, stuffed inside a hatbox that reeked of camphor. Polaroids from the 70s. Colors leaching into sepia. Nana smiling stiffly in a floral dress. Nana holding a swaddled bundle. Nana standing beside a crib, face shadowed. Mira flipped to the next photo. The crib was empty. No, not empty. A dark smudge filled it, amorphous, with 2 pinpricks of light, where a face might be. The next photo showed Nana clutching the bundle tighter. Her smile, now a rictus. The one after that was torn in half. You shouldn't be up here. Mira dropped the photos. Ada stood in the attic doorway, gripping a casserole dish. Her house dress hung loose on skeletal shoulders. The house doesn't like it, Ada said. They drank lukewarm Earl Grey at the kitchen table. The stain by their feet rippled faintly when Ada spoke. Your mama never told you why we left, did she? After your sister died. Mira's spoon clinked against her cup. I don't have a sister. Ada's milky eyes narrowed. Stillborn, they said. Cord wrapped around her neck. But your Nana, she wouldn't let them take the body. Kept it in the crib 3 days, praying over it. On the 3rd night, she leaned forward, breath sour with decay. The crying stopped. Wind lashed the house. The lights flickered. In the sudden dark, Mira felt something brush her ankle cold and fibrous, like wet roots. "It's hungry," Ada whispered. "Been waiting for you." The nightmares got worse. Mira dreamed of the closet opening, of that white, segmented thing spilling out like a jointed snake. It tasted her hair as she pretended to sleep. In the morning, she found clumps of hair on her pillow, roots flecked with scalp. She started wearing Nana's locket, a tarnished silver oval that left green stains on her collarbone. Inside was a lock of baby-fine hair, corn silk blonde, her mother's, but her mother had jet-black curls. The stain under the stairs began to move. She catch it shifting in her periphery, oozing toward the bathroom when she showered. The water always drained slowly, gurgling as if something blocked the pipes. Once, a nest of black hair bubbled up from the drain. Mira pulled and kept pulling 3 feet, 6, 10, until the pipes screamed and the hair snapped, leaving her holding rotted strands that dissolved into sludge. Ada stopped answering her door. Through the window, Mira saw the kitchen table overturned, the floor tiles cracked in a spiral pattern. A single denture sat atop the rubble, teeth marks sunk deep into the acrylic. The last photo surfaced on Mira's third week back. She found it taped under the sink, warped by decades of moisture, a baby picture her own. She assumed with Nana's spidery script on the back. Miriam, 8 months. But the infant's eyes were wrong. Too wide, too knowing, and around its neck hung a tiny silver locket. Mira's fingers went to her own throat. The locket burned. She didn't sleep that night. Sat rigid in bed, watching the closet. At 3:17 a.m., the door creaked open. Cold air poured out, carrying the smell of turned earth and spoiled milk. The thing emerged in segments. First, a clawed hand, then a distended arm, joints popping as it unfolded itself from the dark. Its face was a funhouse reflection of Mira's. Same hazel eyes, same mole above the lip, but the skin hung loose, sliding like melted wax, and its mouth unhinged to reveal a blackened tongue, studded with teeth. "SSS sister," it hissed. Mira's scream caught in her throat. The locket burst open, scattering ash across her chest. The thing laughed a wet, gurgling sound and lunged. She woke on the nursery floor. Dawn bled through filthy windows, illuminating the crib. The sheets were mottled with mildew, except for 2 clean patches, shaped like small bodies. A music box tinkled Rock-A-Bye Baby, though Mira hadn't touched it. The basement door stood open. She descended barefoot, each step colder than the last. The concrete walls glistened with biofilm. At the center of the room sat Nana's old rocking chair. its cane seat rotted away. Behind it, the wall bore a mural painted in something dark and flaking. A family tree. Mira's name branched from her mother. Then Nana. Then generations of women going back to 1843. But beside each name ran a parallel line Miriam I. Miriam II. Miriam III, connected by vertical strokes, labeled Cedar Hollow. 1871, and Harvest. 1932, the newest branch showed her own name, with a dotted line, extending to Miriam 7, B. 1989, her birth year. The rocker creaked. Mira turned. The thing sat there now, skin-taut and human-seeming, wearing her face like an ill-fitting suit. Its locket gleamed silver. You were the lucky one, it said with Mira's mouth. They only ever needed one daughter above ground. The floor trembled. The stain, black and endless, surged up the stairs, consuming walls, photos, light. It wrapped around Mira's ankles, viscous and alive. Dawn tea fight, her not sister crooned as the darkness climbed. You've been feeding her since you arrived. Every fear, every scream. Such a good girl. Mira reached for the locket. It crumbled to rust. The last thing she saw before the dark took her. The house exhaling again. Windows rattling. Foundation groaning as something ancient and ravenous turned over in its sleep. Upstairs, the crib began to cry. Story 10. The Keeper's cycle. The storm severed the power line just after dusk. Mara stood at the kitchen window of the lighthouse keeper's cottage, watching the last sparks of electricity gutter out across the churning black water of the Sound. The mainland was a smudge of shadow 12 miles east, invisible now in the sleet-lashed dark. Her fingers left foggy half-moons on the glass as she pressed closer, as if proximity might conjure the glow of distant houses. Nothing, only the metronomic sweep of the lighthouse beam cutting through the downpour. Its rhythm slightly off since the generator had begun shuddering this morning. They warned her about the isolation, the Coast Guard recruiters, the grizzled mariners at the docks, even the real estate agent who de-leased her the cottage with its peeling clapboards and perpetually damp rugs. November's no time for a rookie keeper, they said, but the paycheck was triple her hospice nursing wages. And the solitude, well, the solitude had seemed like a mercy after the funeral, after the hollow clunk of her brother's urn being lowered into their parents' mausoleum, after the way the mourner's whispers had clung to her skin like cobwebs survivor's guilt, nervous disposition. Maybe she shouldn't be alone. The first night, she laughed at her jumpiness. The cottage creaked like a ship in high seas. Its warped floorboards groaning underfoot. Wind whistled through cracks in the mortar, carrying the briny stench of low tide. She'd chalked up the skittering sounds in the walls to rats. The muffled thumps from the lighthouse tower to loose bricks in the spiral staircase. But by the third evening, when the generator began its arrhythmic coughing, Mara stopped sleeping. It started with the lights. She'd be checking the fuel levels in the generator shed. Rubber boots sinking into the sucking black mud between cottage and tower. When the beam above her would stutter, not the steady 1, 2, 3, 4 sweep mandated by the Coast Guard, but a frantic staccato went with reefer, as though the ancient Fresnel lens were blinking. The first time it happened, she called the maintenance hotline. No answer. The second time, she climbed the 214 rust-pitted steps to the lantern room, thighs burning, and found the gearbox slick with oil that smelled faintly of rancid meat, probably just a seal blown. She told the empty tower, voice swallowed by the moaning wind. The words rang hollow. That night, the dreams began. Not dreams visitations. She'd wake at 3:17 a.m. Precisely, digital clock glowing bloody red, to the sound of wet footsteps circling the cottage. Not the crisp crunch of boots on gravel, but a sodden, sagging sound, like something dragging itself through kelp. Her brother S. voice would follow, warped and watery. Mara, you left the window open. Mara, I am so cold down here. She'd burrow deeper under mothball-scented quilts. Fingers jammed in her ears, until the first gray light of dawn bleached the nightmares away. On the 5th day, the radio died. Static hissed from the receiver like a tide of white insects. Mara crouched before the antique set, tuning knob slipping in her sweaty grip. Outside, the storm raged unabated 6 days now. An unnatural stretch for November squalls. The weather reports had crackled with confusion before cutting out entirely. Low-pressure system. Stalled no recorded precedent. Advise all vessels hello. She thumbed the transmit button, throat tight. This is Mara Voss at Cape Wrath Light. Is anyone a wet pop? Then a voice not the bored drawl of the Coast Guard dispatcher, but a gurgling baritone that dripped with phlegm. SSS-7 keepers. SSS-7 turns. She recoiled, elbow catching the oil lamp on the side table. Glass shattered. The voice continued, rising to a chorus of overlapping whispers, men, women, children, all waterlogged, all chanting. The chain must not break the light, must not the transmission ended with a scream, not hers. By the time she'd mopped up the kerosene, twilight was leaching the color from the cottage walls. Mara moved methodically. Barricaded doors with the oak sideboard, latched shutters, lit every candle she could find. Shadows writhed on the water-stained wallpaper. The beam S rotations cast monstrous silhouettes, a hunched thing with too many limbs here. A gaping maw there that flickered and died, only to reform seconds later. Midnight. The storm S howl took on a new pitch, a keening wail that resonated in her molars. Mara huddled at the top of the cottage stairs, hunting rifle across her knees, her grandfather S. .30 to 6. Rust flecking the barrel. The manual said nothing about firearms. The previous keeper S. journal, which she found tucked behind a loose brick in the pantry, did. October 12th, 1987. The light 1T take the oil, spits it back black and clotted, like old blood. I tried to radio Juno, but the operator just laughed. Same laugh I heard in the fog last night. God, the fog, it moves when you're not looking. IV boarded up the west windows. It wants in. October 29th, 1987. Found the chain today. Washed up in the cove. Links the size of my fist. Iron gone brittle. Crusted with teeth. No shells. Barnacles. But when I touched one, it bit me. The wound festers. Fever dreams. Mom S. face melting like candle wax. Dad singing that shanty about the drowned church. The light blinks at me. I think it S. winking. November 1st, 1987, ITS in the tower. The journal ended there. Mara had burned the last page in the stove. Watching the flames curl, Elias Pike S. frantic handwriting, to ash, now clutching the rifle. She strained to hear, past the storm S. shrieks. There a new rhythm beneath the wind. Clink, 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 metal on stone. She crept to the north window, peeled back the shutter, S. edge. The beams swept past, illuminating the path to the generator shed. Something glinted in the mud, a chain, each link crusted with jagged growths. It led from the shed door to the base of the lighthouse tower, where a hunched figure knelt, pounding at something with a rusted hammer. The figure turned. Mara S. breath fogged the glass. It had Elias Pike S. face, or what remained of it. Barnacles encrusted his eye sockets. Tendrils of kelp sprouting from his nostrils and mouth. His hands were raw meat wrapped around the hammer. Bones visible through shredded flesh. Yet he smiled, blackened teeth clicking as his jaw unhinged. SSS 7 keepers. She slammed the shutter. When she looked again, the chain lay still. Dawn brought no relief. The storm clamped down like a bell jar. Air thick with brine, and the coppery tang of impending hemorrhage. Mara rationed her last can of beans, trying to ignore the whispers seeping through the walls. Left him to drown, didn't he, you? Just like Mom said. Selfish girl, The light gets hungry. She checked her phone, no signal. Battery at 12%. Her reflection in the black screen startled her. Hollow eyes, lips cracked and bleeding, hair matted with salt. How long since she'd slept, since she'd eaten anything but cold beans and rainwater. The generator failed at moonrise. Mara was in the lantern room when the gears ground to a halt. The great lens froze mid-rotation, casting the island in darkness. Distantly, through the storm S-wail, she heard ships' horns desperate, discordant blasts. Closer, the clink, clink, clink resumed, faster now. She fumbled down the spiral stairs, flashlight beam jittering. The tower walls wept black sludge. Her boots slipped on steps that felt wrong, too smooth, too evenly spaced, like vertebrae. Halfway down, the light caught a figure ascending. Ethan. The name tore from her ragged. Her brother stood 2 flights below, seawater streaming from his funeral suit. His face was bloated, crab larvae wriggling in his eye sockets. You let go, he gurgled. You let the current take me. Mara screamed, fled upward. The tower stretched impossibly 214 steps, became 300, 400. The walls narrowing until her shoulders scraped stone. Behind her, wet footsteps multiplied. She recognized other voices now. SSSSO cold, in the trench. The light promised we'd be together 7 turns of the chain. The lantern room door was sealed. Mara beat her fists, bloody, against the wood. The footsteps reached the landing. Please. She turned, back pressed to the door. They stood in a semicircle. Ethan, Elias Pike. A woman in a 1920s flapper dress, dripping with algae. A child, missing its lower jaw. Behind them, the tower walls pulsed like a throat. Ethan extended a waterlogged hand. It's your turn, Mara. 7 keepers to wind the chain. 7 turns to keep the light burning. What chain? She sobbed. The child giggled, seawater bubbling through its neck stump. Elias Pike raised his hammer, the one that holds him down. The door gave way. Mara fell backward into the lantern room. The frozen lens loomed above her, its prisms clouded with centuries of grime. Through the murk, she glimpsed something moving in the glass, not her reflection, but a colossal shape coiled beneath the waves. Tentacles as wide as skyscrapers, flexing in the abyss. The lighthouse beam, she realized with dawning horror, wasn't a warning. It was a beacon. Clink, clink, clink. The chain materialized around her, links biting into her palms. The storm's roar became a deafening chant. 7 keepers, 7 turns, 7 sins, 7 burns. Mara understood. The generator, the voices, the never-ending storm, they were all part of the ritual. The previous keepers hadn't gone mad. They been promoted. The first hammer blow shattered her left kneecap as she crawled toward the lens, dragging the chain. Mara wondered if the next keeper would find her journal, if they hear her voice in the static, if they taste the salt in their tears, and finally understand. Some lighthouses keep you safe. They keep you